All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live, and I have a special guest. I'm not even going to have him backstage. I'm just going to introduce him right away because this guy's a legend, a radio legend, California legend as a whole. And I believe that California would be in a much different place if this guy would have been the governor. Larry Elder, thank you for coming on the show.
Lou, thank you for having the black face to white supremacy. I appreciate it.
The blackface. Real quick, speaking of that, I mean, there's so much that I want to get into this with you, but I just want to give you a big shout out because I know the way you shouted me out on Twitter was because you saw a video. Obviously, I did a reaction to your video about Denzel, and number one, you're like, when I first started doing this, you were the guy. Here's why I say you were the guy, because there was a video you did of basically asking, how racist is Trump toward black people, and I did a reaction to that specific video, which has exploded on your page, and that was the first ever video that went viral on my channel. It was a reaction to Larry Elder, and the crowd is always telling me react to Larry Elder's videos. So I want to give you a big thanks, man, because you've single-handedly introduced a whole new realm of young conservatives, young libertarians, young liberals who are now more conservatives. So you've opened the doors for a lot of us, man. So I want to give you a huge thank you for that.
Well, Lou, I appreciate that. Just as people like Thomas Sowell, the great economist who's still alive, and the late Walter Williams opened my eyes about a lot of things. They're both black. And Thomas Sowell grew up with his family. His parents died when he was very young, grew up in Harlem with his, I think, aunts. And Walter Williams grew up in Philadelphia in the inner city. Yet both of them realized that racism was not the major problem holding black people back. And they opened my eyes to a lot of things as well. My father was a lifelong Republican, Lou. He never knew his biological father. Talk about dirt poor. People say that so-and-so didn't have two nickels to rub together. My dad didn't have the first nickel. My last name is Elder. My dad's biological father's last name was not Elder. My dad never met his biological father. The reason my name is Elder is because my dad took the name of a man who's in his life the longest. I'm not even sure the man even adopted my dad. My grandmother, my dad's mom, was illiterate, could neither read nor write. My dad was born in the back of a room, not uncommon for people in the South in those days. He was born in 1915 in Athens, Georgia. And my dad comes home at the age of 13, Lou, and he starts quarreling with his mom's then boyfriend. Elder was long gone. Elder, by the way, was an alcoholic who would beat up his mother. And when my dad tried to stop it, he beat up my dad. My dad was an only child. And so he comes home at the age of 13, and my dad starts quarreling with his mom's then boyfriend. The mom sides with the boyfriend, I kid you not, and throws my father out of the house, never to return. A 13-year-old black boy, Athens, Georgia, Jim Crow South at the beginning of the Great Depression. And I didn't get along with my father when we grew up. My father, I thought, was too harsh. And so the reason I'm telling you all this stuff is because when I was 25 years old, my dad and I had a 10-hour conversation when my dad told me all the things I'm about ready to tell you. The reason I didn't know them is because I didn't like my dad. I thought he was harsh. I thought he spanked us too hard. By us, I mean my two brothers. We all felt the same way about my father. We did not like him. So I never asked my dad about his life. So I'm 25 years old, and I couldn't sleep. And I knew it had to do with the fact that my dad and I had not spoken for almost 10 years. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And so I sat down with my dad, and he started telling me about his life. And I was shocked to hear all this stuff. My dad worked 2 full-time jobs as a janitor when I was growing up. I saved his nickels and dimes and started a restaurant near downtown LA. And I had to work for him. I didn't like working for him. So I'm 15 years old. Having worked for him for about 5 or 10 years. So my dad would yell at me all the time. When I say restaurant, envision a little shoebox, maybe 18 stools or so. So when my dad would yell at me, everybody in the building could hear him yell at me. And now I'm 15 years old and it's embarrassing. And I said to myself, the next time this SOB yells at me, I'm going to walk out. No one ever defied my dad before. So my dad yelled at me and I worked up the courage and I walked out. My dad came home that night. He was furious. He said, "Why did you leave?" And for the first time, I spoke back to my father. And I said, "Dad, I got sick and tired of the way you spoke to me, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore." My dad paid me $10 a day plus tips. He balled up the $10. He threw it at me as I lay on my bed, walked out of my bedroom, and we did not have a conversation for 10 years. Meanwhile, I graduated from high school. I go to the East Coast for college. I go to the Midwest for law school. I end up getting a job with the big law firm in Cleveland. And I should be living large. I'm 25 years old. I was making the equivalent now of about 150K, and I couldn't sleep. I knew it had to do with my dad. So I called my secretary. I said, cancel all my appointments. I'm flying to LA for a couple of days and I'll come back. So I didn't tell my dad and my mom I was coming because I didn't want my dad to prepare. So I take a cab from LAX. I go to the restaurant. I walk in at 1:30. I knew he closed at 2:30. And my dad was shocked to see me. Again, we had not spoken to each other for 10 years. When I say not spoken to each other, I mean nothing. My dad and my mom are together. We have a tiny little house. I just made sure he and I were not in the same room whenever I was with my mom. So I just literally avoided him until I graduated from high school. We didn't talk for 10 years. So I walk in. He was shocked to see me. He said, Dad, he said, Larry, should I put your luggage in the back? I said, no, Dad, I'm only going to be here for about 5 or 10 minutes. I want to tell you something. And I was going to tell him what an SOB I thought he was. I figured he'd tell me I'm an ungrateful son, Lou. And then maybe at that point, I'd be able to sleep. So I sat there. My dad said, wait until we close. So I got there at 1:30. We closed at 2:30, as I said. I sat on the stool for an hour and I said, Larry, calm down. Don't tell him everything he's ever done. Don't tell him everything he's ever said that offended you. Just give him the highlights, get in and out 5 or 10 minutes and go back home. So my dad sat down on a stool right next to me. We're talking about 6 inches away from me. And I teed off on him. You're getting to know me, Lou. You know how I can go. So I spoke for almost 20 minutes nonstop. I told him about every spanking, every whipping, everything he'd ever said to me. The time my cousin Elaine came from Cleveland, he spanked me in front of her. The time my good friend Carl came over and my dad spanked me in front of him. I told him everything he'd ever done. I spoke for 20 minutes nonstop. And finally, I was out of ammo. I couldn't think of anything else he said or did to me. And my dad said, is that it? And I said, yeah. He said, let me tell you about my father. And this is the first time I heard about this stuff I just told you a moment ago. And my dad cried. I never thought my father could physically cry. I'd never seen him cry before. He said, let me tell you about my father. That's when he told me about this guy named Elder. And he came home at the age of 13. Mom threw him out of the house. Then I said, well, Dad, what did you do? And for the next 8 hours, he told me about his life. I walked down the street, Larry. It wasn't even a street, it was a dirt road. I cleaned up trash. I cleaned out barns. I cooked for a family. I did whatever I could to earn a living. Finally, my dad said he got a job as a Pullman porter on the trains. They were the largest private employer of blacks in those days. So this young black man who'd never left Athens, Georgia, gets on a train and goes all around the country. And he traveled to this place called California, a city called Los Angeles. And my dad was blown away. You could walk in the front door of a restaurant and get served. He already had packages of crackers and 10 cans of tuna with him because you never knew in the South if you'd be able to get a meal. So my dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joined Marines. I asked him why he joined the Marines. He said 2 reasons. If anybody is listening to your show, Lou, who's a Marine, they'll know what I'm going to say. 2 reasons. The first reason is they go where the action is. Second reason, I love the uniforms. So my dad was a cook for the colored soldiers because the military was segregated in those days. He was a staff sergeant, meaning he was a marksman and a leader of men. So the war is over. My dad goes back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he'd moved to, and where he met and married my mom, and he was going to get him a job as a cook. My dad can look at a cake and tell you what's in it. He's that good. He goes to 3 or 4 restaurants, and they tell him to his face, we don't hire niggers. My dad goes to an unemployment office. The lady says, you went through the wrong door. He goes to the hall. He sees colored only. He goes through that door to the very same lady who sent him out. She just wanted him to know what the rules were. My dad came home to my mom and said, this is BS. I'm going to Los Angeles, where I was before the war. I'm going to get me a job as a cook, and I'll send for you. My dad comes out to LA. He walks around for about a day and a half, and he's told, you don't have any references. My dad said, I need references to make ham and eggs. And that was their way of saying we don't hire N-words either, but they were a little more polite about it. My dad even offered to work for free for 2 weeks to just give me a written reference, and they wouldn't do that either. So my dad goes to an unemployment office, this time just 1 door. Lady says, I don't have anything. My dad said, what time do you open? She says 9. What time do you close? She says 5. My dad said, I'll be in that chair till you have something. He sat there the next day for a whole day, came back the next day until around lunchtime. She calls him up. She said, I have something. I don't know if you're going to want it. My dad said, of course I'm going to want it. I'm starting a family. What is it? She said, there's a job cleaning toilets at Nabisco brand bread. My dad did that for over 10 years, took a second full-time job at another bread company called Barbara Ann Bread, also cleaning toilets, cooked for a family on the weekend because he wanted to make additional money so that My mom would be a stay-at-home mom for my brothers and me. And my dad went to night school 3 or 4 nights a week to get his GED. And then after that, he went to night school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. The man never slept, Lou. That's why he was grouchy all the time. I don't know about you, but if I don't get at least 5 or 6 hours each night, you don't want to be around me. My dad would sleep 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes, 15 minutes, not day after day, not week after week, not month after month, but year after year. You do that and you walk into a house with 3 rambunctious boys. My brothers and I were rambunctious, and see how you feel, which is why he was always so grouchy. So now my dad is telling me about his life, and man is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Larry's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now at the end of the conversation, I'm crying. And I said, Dad, please forgive me for judging you so unfairly. My dad said, don't worry about it. Just follow the advice I've always given you and your brothers. And it is this: hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. Larry, you cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan or groan about what somebody did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, my dad said this, Lou: no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later, bad things are going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. For the next 35 years, my dad and I were extremely close. By the way, everything I told you about, I wrote in a book called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. The reason I called it that is because after we had this conversation, I fly back to Cleveland where I was working. My dad wrote me a letter. He never wrote me a letter in his life. And it started out, Dear Son. I wrote him back. He never called me Dear Son. I wrote him back and I said, Dear Father. So the book is called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, about the 8-hour conversation I just told you about.
Wow. Yeah, that's in my opinion, that's just something of a foundation, obviously, that I think that you've, once again, those type of stories you've planted. Because I grew up without a dad. People know, and I didn't meet my dad till I was 22. I'm 27 now. Right. So that was a crazy, crazy time, to eventually get to know who my dad was after he was in prison for so many years. So I love that. I think a lot of Black folks get mad at you for this. I think a lot of people get mad that you go and you just say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps or get it done no matter what. And in that story, in my opinion, what I got from it is life is going to be hard regardless. Everybody's going to have it hard. Everybody has a sob story. Just get the job done.
And Lou, my dad had no bootstraps. So I don't know very many people who had a tougher life than my father. So my dad talked the talk and he walked the walk. There are a couple of other things that are foundational in my life too, Lou. My dad was a Republican, lifelong Republican. My mom was a Democrat, lifelong Democrat. And they would sit at the kitchen table and they would argue over politics. Nobody called anybody a Nazi. Nobody called anybody a fascist. Nobody said, you don't care about the poor. You only care about rich. They argued civilly and respectfully. My dad said this about the Democratic Party. And the older I got, the more I realized he was right. Democrats want to give you something for nothing. When you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. The other thing that's foundational in my life, which a lot of Black people didn't have, Lou, I think this is important. I grew up with a lot of white people, and I cannot tell you that I had bad experiences. Every now and then be some a-hole, but for the most part, I thought I was treated fairly. My first elementary school, my teacher was white. I didn't have a Black teacher until I was in the 7th grade. All my teachers I went to 2 different elementary schools. They were all white, and the classes were about half white, if not more. Every now and then there was a bully, and the bullies were not whites. They were Black kids. I go to a church called Western Knoll Congregational Church. The pastor was white. At least half the congregation was white. I was in the Cub Scouts. My Cub Scout leader was white. Most of the kids in my Cub Scout den were Black, but a handful of them were white. I played Little League baseball. One of the kids on the baseball team was white. I go to Washington High School, my first high school. I went to 4 high schools for reasons we can get into, but my first high school was probably about 50% white. I was there for just 1 semester before I transferred to Crenshaw High School. And I saw in that 1 semester maybe a half a dozen fights. And from what I can tell, all the fights I saw between Blacks and whites were started by Blacks. I'm not saying they were all started by Black people, just the ones that I witnessed were. And so the jerks there that I saw, minority of jerks, were always Black. I can't recall a single white guy who I thought was a bully. And I go to college. Most of my classmates were white. Everybody in my hall was white. I was a resident advisor over these kids. I go to law school. Most of my classmates were white. So I've been around a lot of white people. My dad's cafe near downtown LA, a third of the clientele was black, a third was Hispanic, and a third was white. And I never had a problem. I remember when I was in Cub Scouts, it was called a Cub Scout Jamboree, where all the DENS troops from California were in one place, area of LA, of California called Yucaipa, a very beautiful area, was and still is a very beautiful kind of woodsy area. I'd never been in an area like that. And I was on a little mountain, and I could look down, and there were hundreds of scouts. Every now and then you see a little black dot here and there. So out of these hundreds, I was one of 4 or 5 black kids. In my cabin, there must have been about 8 or 9 kids for 2 weeks. I was the only black kid. And there was one white kid who did not like me and called me a nigger. And Lou, I had to literally restrain the other kids from killing him. They were more angry about him than I was. My point is this: whenever I've been around a lot of white people, every now and then you find some sort of adverse situation, but whenever I've been mistreated or somebody said something that shouldn't have been said to me by a white guy, most of the other white people were more pissed off about that white guy than even I was. So this idea that white people are systemically racist, are demeaning to black people, are bigoted, that's never been my experience. Never.
Well, I definitely want to get back to that. And once again, we got Larry Elder on the show. We are doing this live. So I'm seeing a lot of you guys say the VP. They're throwing around, as they're listening to you, they're throwing around this VP stuff with Trump. So we will be talking about that. And Larry, thank you so much for
I had a long meeting with the man when I dropped out of the race for president. I'll tell you about that.
Well, we're definitely, because you said we got you here for some time. So I love these stories, and I want to get to them.
You got me wound up now, bro.
No, I got you. Listen, we're cooking. We're cooking. We got a lot to talk about. I want to talk about this terrorist warning attack, right? And I definitely want to get to a lot more other stuff. But the FBI and the DHS sent a warning that in June there could potentially be an ISIS attack. Larry, I want to get your thoughts, because you did run for president, and of course, if you did, let's just say hypothetically you won the presidency, or you won or governor, that is a huge responsibility of being in contact with the DHS or the FBI, as they're telling you, or Joe Biden at this point, is that, hey, we're worried about, potential terrorist attack against the LGBTQ and all these different. What is going on with this timing? I am a conspiracy realist, not really theorist, because a lot of these conspiracies do come true like 6 months later. What are your thoughts on a warning like this out of nowhere about ISIS?
Well, I must tell you, Lou, I'm amazed we have not been hit again since 9/11. This is a big, wide open country, especially in the last 3.5 years, with this border completely wide open. There are about 8 or 9 million illegal aliens in the country, hundreds of them on the terror watch list. To me, it's just a matter of time before we get whacked. There have been a number of instances where military bases have been attacked. Often it's not widely covered, but a number of times that's happened. And in my opinion, the only reason we've not had a major scale attack on American soil since Biden's been in office is because they don't want to do it while Biden is in office, because it'll simply make Trump more popular. Trump has been warning about all of this. If we have another attack on American soil, particularly if it's some illegal alien who came in the southern border or even the northern border under Joe Biden's watch, it'll be blamed on Joe Biden, and that will make Donald Trump even more popular. So in my opinion, they're keeping their powder dry until and unless Donald Trump gets reelected. But it's very scary what's going on. This is a country where we have allowed Chinese people to come in. 60 Minutes did a piece a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
They said the largest group coming in the country now are Chinese. And China, communist China, is a huge adversary to America. So we are vulnerable in ways we've never been before. Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, testified under Congress a few months ago and said he's never seen the threat level this high.
Yeah, and that's why I believe they're coming out now. They're pretty much panicking. Larry, another big question. By the way, guys, hit the smash that like button, ladies and gentlemen. This question right here is a good. I don't know if you've answered this before. Election this year, does it happen? Yes or no?
Of course it will. Yeah. Will the Democrats cheat, as in my opinion they did in 2020? Absolutely. But I don't think it's going to be successful. And the reason primarily is this: you say all you want to say about Donald Trump. All you want to say about the border, which is a major issue. All you want to say about crime, which is a major issue. The biggest issue is this. The average family of four, Lou, is paying $1,200 a month more for the same goods and services that family bought before Joe Biden became elected, while the raises that people are getting have not kept up with that. So people are losing ground. It's a very simple question. Are you better now or less better or less well off than you were under Donald Trump? And most Americans, when I'll tell you, they are less well off now under Joe Biden. 2/3 of the American people believe the country is on the wrong track. Inflation, 40-year high, gas prices 50% higher. And then you look at the crime. All of this attack on the police, defund the police, all this rhetoric that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and others have done have made the police pull back. It's called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. So while you're finding violent crime up, you're finding arrests down because the police are demoralized. They realize that nobody has their back, and a lot of people are resigning. So New York is understaffed by thousands of officers. LA is understaffed by thousands of officers. Same thing in Chicago. Same thing about every major city. Yeah. When you make it less likely that a bad guy is going to be caught, convicted, and incarcerated, crime would go up. They may be bad guys, but they're not fools. They realize that they're less likely to be caught, which is why you're seeing these smash and grabs and things like this going on all over the country. Crime is up. The FBI, by the way, says crime is down. That's because the government keeps two levels of stats. The first stat is kept by the FBI on reported crime. It turns out, with all these soft on crime DAs, people going in and out prison in one day, a lot of people now are not even bothering to call cops. The second stat they keep is something called the Crime Victimization Survey, where 250,000 people every year are asked, have you been victimized by a crime, whether you've reported it or not? It turns out those who report being victimized by violent crime is up almost 50% in the last couple of years. So crime is up. Crime borders the economy, but far and away the economy. People are less well off now than they were under President Donald Trump. He's never been more popular, and the recent polls have shown him winning every single swing state except for one, and that's Wisconsin, and even that one is in the margin of error.
Very, very interesting you say that, because I've noticed, especially in New York, I went down to these and I want to talk about the college protests and stuff like that, because I know you've been covering that. I want to, because one of the main arguments that these kids have, I mean, they're so anti-establishment until it comes to, you know, the true crimes that are happening in the hood. I'm from the Bronx, New York, born and raised, so I know what's really going on out there. So when I talk to them and they tell me crime is down, funny that you say that, because I'm like, well, where are they getting these statistics from? And it's mostly super progressive kids, right. A lot of them 18 to 25, right? So most of them are not kids, they're young adults, but they're coming out and they're saying the city's never been so safe. And crime is officially down. But we were seeing videos. I don't know if you saw one of the latest videos out of New York City, that a woman was walking in the Bronx and then she got held up with a belt and dragged. Yep. And we're seeing stuff like that happen a lot. 11-year-old stabbed, right? Another shooting, a guy who was fighting back was also shot against robbers. So there's a lot of different things happening in the Bronx, specifically in New York City as a whole. So why do you think this narrative is it an election season thing? Is the FBI also colluding with these numbers?
Yeah, all of the above. It's a media bias thing. They don't want to talk about the crime because, again, it makes Joe Biden look bad. I'm in Los Angeles, and there was an election recently, and the woman that became mayor is named Karen Bass. And during the debate, she was asked, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the most violent, how safe do you think Los Angeles is? She said, I'm sorry, 10 being the most safe, 1 being the most scary. On a scale from 1 to 10, where do you put the crime in Los Angeles? She said, oh, a 10, very safe. 2 weeks later, her house was broken into.
Yeah, I saw that.
They stole 2 firearms. Now, think about that. The left people believe we have too many firearms. She had 2 of them in her house.
Wow. And
then she got elected mayor about a few weeks ago. Guess what happened? Somebody broke into the mayor's mansion when she was there with her family. Hello, is this thing on? It's, and it's easy for at least to say crime is not high because they're living in the suburbs. They have private security. They have high walls. They have firearms in their own home. So in their neighborhoods, I'm pretty sure they're pretty safe. But the real crime takes place in the inner city
and the hoods,
where the police are demoralized. Yeah.
Adam Schiff was robbed not too long ago. I read something about Adam Schiff being robbed.
His car was broken into, Lou, and he was in LA to give a speech. So his car was broken into. They took his luggage, so he wasn't able to wear a suit and tie. Barbara Boxer, the former senator of California, a couple of weeks ago was mugged Her cell phone was taken. When I ran for governor in 2021, Gavin Newsom was attacked by a homeless guy. He had a security detail, so he was okay. And you can't.
Well, I'm not saying they deserve it. That's not what I'm saying. Wink, wink. But you know, sometimes it happens to those. Hello, is this thing on? I like that one. My girlfriend's grandmother uses that line. I love that. Real quick, okay, this is I think another great question for you, because I think a lot of people are from California that are watching. How different will California, or would California be now if you had won that election? If if you were governor, how different would it have been?
I think it would have been very different. When I was campaigning up and down the state in 2021, I cannot tell you how many people said, Larry, if you lose, I'm leaving. If you win, I will stay. We've lost 1 million people in California the last 3 years, and I know that the exodus picked up in speed after I left. I'd have a whole different attitude about the budget, about housing, about crime, about homelessness, about the quality of our education. We spend K through 12 probably more money than almost any other state does, yet only about 25% of third graders, Black third graders, Hispanic third graders can read and do math at grade level. We have a real high crime. We have the highest percentage, one of the highest percentages of poverty in America. We have the most homeless people in America. And all of this happened under the watch of these Democrats. When I say that, we have two houses of legislature, the Senate and the Assembly, and they have super majorities in both of them, meaning Republicans need not show up to work and the Democrats can pass whatever bill they want. And Gavin Newsom was a two-term mayor of San Francisco. He was a two-term lieutenant governor, and now he's in his second term as governor. This guy has been in office now for decades, and all of this has happened under his watch.
Yeah, it's I've read, I was watching a video, doing some research last night, and I read, I think you did a Fox News, but I don't think it was it was another Fox, maybe from somewhere in California, and those comments were so endearing. They were really, just really going. They were pretty much saying that California should have chosen you, and there's a lot of Californians that feel that way today. What is your message for them as California taxes, gas, like you said, homelessness, all these things that you pretty much predicted when you was running, and they've come into fruition. In fact, before you even go, there was something that happened, I think it was last year. Xi Jinping was coming into town. And for some reason, California did not look so homeless no more.
All of a sudden,
what was that about? Can you give us some insight? Because I saw Joe Rogan, everybody was talking about that.
What it's about, Lou, is that this problem of homelessness can be tackled if the will is there to do it. They knew it was going to look bad when the premier of China came here to the Bay Area with all this homeless, and so all of a sudden it got cleaned up. So I know it can be done. They just have to have the will to do it. I wrote a book about California, about the homelessness and about the crime, and about how we're mismanaging water, how we're mismanaging our forests, how bad the schools are, how many people are leaving, how we're overtaxed. We have the highest state income tax in the country, 13.3%. And I wrote a book about it called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation. And the point is, a lot of people are leaving California. They have no idea that the price of a home, which is twice the national average, has to do with all these left-wing policies. They just know they can't get a home. That's the primary reason that people leave California. And they go to Arizona, they go to Texas, they go to Florida, and they bring their politics with them because they haven't connected the dots. My point is, if you leave California, understand why you're leaving. You're leaving because of all these left-wing tax, spend, regulate, climate change, alarmism policies that have made California so difficult to live in because of the cost of living.
Yeah, it seems like I saw you speak about that. A lot of people that are going to Texas, they're bringing in their liberalism and they're literally bringing in what they were running away from. It's kind of like the border, right? A lot of people are bringing in because they're not being vetted. They're bringing in exactly what they're running away from, and it also gives space for people that they're running away from to also sneak in with them, which is what you're seeing in New York City.
Meanwhile, Lou, there's nonsense going on. The governor has signed a bill that set up a panel for reparations. California wasn't even a slave state. I mean, you can't make this up. Reparations, the extraction of money from people who were never slave owners to be given to people who were never slaves. And if you want to play that game, I'm in California. There were laws that prevented the Japanese from owning farmland. There were laws that stopped the Chinese from participating in the laundry industry in the Bay Area. Where's their reparations? Everybody has a grievance, as you pointed out a moment ago. We need to just get back to hard work, accountability, investing in yourself, and taking advantage of what we have in America. There are 8 billion people in the world, Lou, and I dare say the majority of them would trade places with us if they could do so. Right now, as we speak, there are Haitians lining up in Haiti for a lottery, a shot at coming to America. Meanwhile, you have a bunch of so-called black leaders running around and white Democrats running around talking about how systemically racist America is. Also, we did this in California. The governor has banned the sale of new gas-powered cars by the year 2035. That's why I find it so laughable when people are saying, well, Joe Biden might be swapped out for Gavin Newsom. Are you kidding me? The only advantage Gavin Newsom has over Joe Biden is that he's younger. But everything that you don't like about Joe Biden, his war on oil and gas, opening up the borders, California is a sanctuary state, how bad the schools are, opposition to school choice, everything that Joe Biden supports, Gavin Newsom would make worse. So if you're not happy with Joe Biden, you would not be happy with having a younger version of Joe Biden, only who's even more extremist on the left.
Yeah, he'll probably be more extreme. I mean, you see the pandering. Would you say that that's pandering, trying to pander by, even though California wasn't a slave state, that they want to give out reparations? Do they want to pander so much to that black vote?
Well, you're in the Bronx, Lou. You mentioned being in the Bronx. What did your governor just now say? Black kids in the Bronx don't know what a computer is.
Yeah, that was Kathy Hochul. I actually went around asking black kids, middle school, high schoolers, do they know what a computer is? Because that was the most insane. But then you talk about pandering. That would be pandering.
They do that all the time. Joe Biden goes on Charlemagne the God and said, "You ain't really black unless you want to vote for me." Joe Biden gives a speech in front of some black audience and says that Mitt Romney wants to put y'all back in chains. And Joe Biden has lied for decades, claiming that he desegregated movie theaters and restaurants in Delaware. Even the New York Times said there's no evidence of it, and that his aides gently tried to remind Joe Biden not to keep saying it. And Biden kept saying it. Biden said he was raised in a black church. And people went to that church where he allegedly was raised and asked church members if he was ever there. Nobody ever saw him there. He claimed that he got arrested trying to visit Nelson Mandela during apartheid South Africa. No evidence of it whatsoever. That's what these guys do. Condescending, saying a bunch of BS to black people, let them know we're on your side. Meanwhile, they destroyed the black family. In 1965, 25% of black kids entered the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. It prompted a book called The Negro Action, A Case for National Action, written by a Democrat named Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He said, oh my God, 25% of black kids enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. This is horrible. We need to do something about this. Lyndon Johnson launched a so-called war on poverty, and since then he's incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. Now, fast forward, 70% of black kids enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. 25% of white kids do. 50% of Hispanic kids do. 40% of all Americans now enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, up threefold from the mid-60s. And we've incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And nobody is talking about what I consider to be the number one domestic issue in America, which is the number of kids raised without dads. If you're white and you talk about it, you'll be accused of engaging in systemic racism or somehow dissing the heroic job that single moms are doing to raise black boys and black girls. If you're black and you say this, you'll be called, as I was, an Uncle Tom or the black face of white supremacy. So nobody, Lou, is talking about the number one domestic issue in America, which is a large number of kids who enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. Barack Obama one time even mentioned the stats. And when he did so, Jesse Jackson told him to stop talking down to black people. And it's this: if you're raised without a father, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail.
Yeah, I've heard people not like that you say that. They think that you're pandering, but I believe you, because I didn't grow up. My brother and I didn't grow up with a dad, and he obviously turned to gang culture for protection and more, and more that he was insecure of what his future would be. So he started hanging out on the block and became a part of a gang, and obviously he's still in prison today.
And Lou, that said, this is very important. That said, it's still about choices. I just now mentioned my father never knew his biological father. It is still about choice. You have a moral obligation to pick up the cards and play them to the best of your ability. And if you do that, and people see that you're trying, they will help you. There'll be plenty of help as long as you try to play your card to the best of your ability. That is your moral obligation. That is your duty, especially in America.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was, almost headed in that direction, but I decided to not head in that direction because I knew I had choices and I knew I'd be a better man.
What turned you around? What turned you around, Lou?
What turned me around was seeing the mistakes that what my father made, right? 18 years in federal prison. Then he got deported to the DR. And then my brother, and then people that I grew up with that I love dearly still to this day. I just knew that there was no future for them because they didn't want one. I was the first one to go to college. I was the first one to graduate high school in my inner family and go to college for free to play baseball. So I knew that something about me was different, especially from everybody that I grew up around, predominantly a Black neighborhood. A lot of people they weren't speaking of these things. And most of the leaders that are in their 30s and 40s now, back then they were in their 20s. I was in, my teenage years growing up. A lot of them, they were just trying to pass down gang culture. They wasn't trying to pass down any knowledge. So it is pretty crazy that I find myself walking this conservative direction, or more less, I guess delinquency, in my opinion, I would call it. Especially because my mom is a Christian. She was a Christian woman. She's a praying woman. She would always pray for my brother, and she would always pray for me. And I believe that eventually worked, and I'm more closer to Jesus, more closer to God, although I kind of faded away from it. So I would say that's what changed me. It's watching others really just throw their lives away for absolutely nothing.
And tell me about your brother.
So my brother, Puerto Rican young man. We have different fathers, but we both grew up without them. My mom was a single mom, unfortunately. We came from Puerto Rico into the United States. Obviously, Puerto Rico is still a part of the United States, but it's two different lifestyles, especially coming in. You receive more government help, and we received a lot of government help. And my brother was a good young kid, man. He was good. Like he was a leader. He would keep me out of trouble. The problem with him then became, as we have a 3-year age gap. And he got to high school before me, obviously. And when he got to high school, everything changed. He just started getting inspired by the money, right? 15 years old, you're making, a couple dollars, you know what I'm saying? Selling this little bag of weed, and, you start going. So I think for him was the money. For him was the money, because we struggled so much that he was just like, man, I don't want to struggle. I don't want to wait to get a job. I want to do it now. And then the young adults in the block, they took him in like it was no problem. So they glorified that.
Well,
so
they also use them because when you're a teenager or a kid, you get busted. You don't do any time. It's the adults who do the time. So they use young kids. They exploit them, and this money is just short-term little money. It's not really big money. None of these guys have pensions. They don't have 401k. They don't have homes. It's just short-term chump change, frankly.
Yeah. So I think that's what, like you said, I think he was just used in the long term for that benefit for them to make money, because they had him running around. He was the one running around, and then eventually he had other people running around. But one thing about him, I'll say that I respect about my brother, is that he kept me out of trouble. For some reason, he made sure I went to school. He made sure I played baseball. He made sure I did all these things.
And he was younger than you?
No, he's 3 years older than me.
He's older, okay.
Yeah. That's he got a lifestyle.
Where did you play baseball?
I played baseball at Morris High School in the Bronx, 169 Boston Road, and then I went to Globe Tech Institute of Technology, which is a D1 JUCO 2-year school.
Wow.
Yeah, I was D1. I was D1 student, man. 6'3". I was doing some things.
What position did you play?
Center field. I was very fast. So yeah, that's what I actually have. One of the players I used to play with, he's actually in the major leagues right now. I go to see him all the time. He plays for the Tampa Bay Rays. Richie Palacio, shout out to him.
Why did
enough about me, Larry.
Wait. Real quick, because I love baseball, my favorite sport. Yeah. Why did you stop playing?
Same thing as my brother. Though I did not walk the line that he did, I felt that there was so much pressure in my life, and I was recruited as a model. Actually, I began modeling, and I began, acting, and I began to do all these different things. And I just thought that the future of baseball really wasn't it. So I moved to Miami. I wanted to leave the hood so bad, so I moved to Miami. And I started a new life at 19 years old because I really hated my life. I hated everything about me, that I grew up, at least, and I just thought that the future for baseball, I saw how many people went to college and they came back broke at 25, 24 years old. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to take the risk. I'm not doing this. Even though I'm really good, I don't know if I'm going to make it or not. So I went to Miami and began modeling. I got signed to Wilhelmina. And then I knew that world was super gay. So I was like, I don't know about this world. I don't know about this. So I got into the nightlife and became a promoter, nightclub. And I was just all over the place, man. And I was with random girls a lot of the time. And I was just walking one of those lines. Once again, wasn't doing anything illegal, but I was walking a very negative line.
Right.
And then YouTube came. And then I began to, so that's pretty much the story. There's a lot more to it, but yeah, that's why I stopped playing baseball. It's because I thought I could do it better.
That's pretty impressive. Well, for me, Lou, I've always known I was going to be successful. I wasn't sure what it would be, but I knew I was going to be successful. I am a lawyer, but I never watched Perry Mason say, oh, that's what I want to do. I became a lawyer because my roommate was taking the law school aptitude test. I said, what's that? He said, well, I'm thinking about going to law school. I said, why? He said, well, you learn about the Constitution, you learn about your rights. That way nobody can take them away from you. You can practice law if you want to, or you can do something else. So that's why I ended up going to law school. But I was always driven. I always hustled, had jobs, a paper route, played piano. I was into horticulture. I made good grades. I went to college in New England at an Ivy League school. I went to law school at the University of Michigan, which was a very good school. Ended up working with a big law firm in Cleveland. I didn't want to be a lawyer the rest of my life. I always wanted to write, but I also wanted to eat. And I knew I knew it's hard to earn a living as a writer. So I started a small business, ran it for about 14 years, made money, sold it, and then came back to LA and went into television and radio, where I've been ever since. And I've become a New York Times bestseller. Do you know I have a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame?
I saw. You're bro. You're a legend. And I call you. I don't mean to call you bro. I know somebody got offended.
That's okay.
It's a New York thing. Oh, bro. Like my mom, I call bro sometimes.
I just called you bro.
I apologize for calling you bro.
I just called you bro. It's fine. I'm on the corner of Hollywood and Vine. Can you believe it? When I was a little kid, my brother loved movies. I couldn't have cared less. We would go to Hollywood, up and down the Walk of Fame. And my older brother, Kirk, would point out all these stars. I don't know how he knew who they were. He knew their backgrounds, what made them stars, this, that, and the other. And now I'm down there on the corner of Hollywood and Vine, southeast corner. Come down and say hello to my stars sometime.
I listen. I think we're already a legend. I think, in my opinion, I could be wrong. Maybe you consider yourself a legend after you ran. But when you ran, a lot of people considered you a radio legend, right? You're like the Larry Elder, right? Why would this guy run? Like, why would he, run as a Republican, as a Black Republican at that? So it's so sad to see that our heroes, especially the Black ones, that there aren't so many of them. They just get torn down. Like, let's go to Ben Carson Ben Carson got torn down like I've never seen. After studying him, what he did, and what he did for Michigan as a whole, the fact that whole place. I think there was a school named after him. They changed. They just did so many things.
Detroit. He grew up in the inner city of Detroit, and there's a high school named after him. After he ran as a Republican, they renamed the school. Can you believe it? Here he is, one of the most renowned surgeons in America, Johns Hopkins, and all of a sudden now he's a sellout in Uncle Tom just because he has an R at the end of his name. Most Black people were Republican for a very long period of time until the New Deal. My dad, as I mentioned, was a lifelong Republican. Martin Luther King Jr.'s father was a Republican. But now if you're a Republican because you believe in low taxes, hard work, less regulation, and a strong national defense, somehow that makes you a sellout. It makes you anti-Black. It is a con the Democrats have indoctrinated a lot of Black people with, and it's making things worse. Look how bad the schools are. I mentioned the destruction of the nuclear intact family. And when you malign the police and they pull back, the people that are most hurt are the very Black and brown people living in the inner city where most of the crime takes place. So the Democrats are pursuing policies that are hurting you while the elites are living in suburbs, so they don't have to deal with the consequences of their bad policies.
Speaking of the suburbs, I want to talk about these protests, and I do want to challenge you here. This one's not going to be easy. I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be easy, but I'm going to try to make it seem like it's not easy because I'm pretty sure you'll be able to overcome these questions. Now, let me ask you this: would you happen to be a Christian?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes. So you're a Christian. I know some people are Catholic Christian. Some people are a lot of different things.
My pastor is a guy named Jack Hibbs. I go to a church called Chino Hills Chapel, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. And he's a very, very well regarded pastor named Jack Hibbs, who strongly supported me when I ran for governor.
There's a lot of people that come, the basketball players that come from Chino Hills. So I know that area because of that. But speaking of, in my opinion, Christianity, I want to get to Israel. And a lot of my followers do not like my stance on Israel. And it's not because I don't love Israel, or that's not, obviously that's where my Lord and Savior walked. And obviously we knew that it would rise again through prophecies. I have a huge problem, and maybe we can talk about it. And I know that you've spoken about these college kids and stuff like that, and I don't agree with any of them. A lot of them are screaming that we are Hamas, which is just insanity. We see that the FBI, DHS is warning about ISIS attacking the LGBTQ, but we see the LGBTQ stand with Palestine, which is crazy. And I don't think that really mixes up, because I think a lot of my Muslim brothers that stand for Palestine, they're looking at the blasphemy from coming from Americans making it about them, right? Transgender Americans standing up in college, podiums and speaking about freeing Palestine and all these different things. Maybe we could speak about that, but really, my whole thing is, when you see these people dying and you see these kids dying, and you see what Hamas did, obviously they started this and stuff like that. But when you see and maybe the numbers are off, but there's still people dying. How can we as Christians say that we're Christian, but support every little thing that Israel does, especially the influence of AIPAC? How many, how they brag about, how many politicians they got, or how many politicians they've endorsed that won. How should a Christian in America look at Israel today?
Well, people on the left have been misled about the history of that whole region. Jews have had a 3,000-year connection to that part of the world. This is actually the third incarnation of Israel. And the shorthand version that the left pushes is that somehow, because of the Holocaust, all of a sudden, the United Nations allowed a bunch of Jews to settle in this area and, quote, stole land from the Palestinians, close quote. There was never a country called Palestine. It was an area. And people living there who were Jews used to call themselves Palestinians. What happened in 1947, the United Nations partitioned that area because it was an area that the Turks used to control. And they lost it after World War I. And they divided it into two areas. A state called Palestine, which, by the way, is 3 or 4 times larger than the West Bank and Gaza combined, and a state called Israel. And within hours of the British leaving, Israel was invaded by 5 different countries at the same time, and the assumption was that Israel would collapse, they would be defeated, and the spoils would be divided among all the different warring countries. Surprise, surprise! This little country managed to defeat Egypt and Iraq and Jordan and Syria, even Saudi Arabia participated, and it survived. It's been on a state of war ever since then. What happened on October the 7th was the biggest attack against Jews since the Holocaust. And what Hamas has done is it's embedded itself in civilians, under mosques, under schools, under hospitals, so that when Israel retaliates, a lot of civilians would be killed, and then they would turn to the world and say, oh my God, Israel is engaging in a genocide. It's exactly what they want. And regarding the number of civilians that are killed, it's sad, it's unfortunate, but in terms of the number of civilians killed versus the number of bad guys killed, Israel actually has a more humane record than we had when we went into Iraq, when we went into Syria. There are going to be deaths when you have urban combat, particularly when your enemy has embedded itself among civilians. It's exactly what they want. And so we ought to be angry at Hamas for causing their citizens to be endangered the way they did because of what happened on October the 7th. The problem is this: when Bibi Netanyahu says, I want to eradicate Hamas, the problem is the majority of people in Gaza, in the West Bank, support Hamas. The Israelis pulled out in 2005, which is why it's maddening when you hear.
But here's the thing: but majority of those people didn't choose Hamas, though. A lot of them are women and children that were not of age to vote back then.
I'm sorry, Lou. When you look at the polls, you could argue that maybe people aren't being honest because they'll be killed if they're not honest. But 75% of them support what Hamas did on October the 7th. 2005, as I mentioned, Israel pulled out. They had elections. Hamas got elected. One woman ran, and she said she had 4 or 5 sons. 3 of them died I call them homicide attacks, not suicide attacks. 3 or 4 of them died in homicide attacks. And she said, I only regret I didn't have more sons so I could commit them to the Intifada. So you have a group of people that support the terrorists. And so when Bibi Netanyahu says, I want to eradicate Hamas, maybe you can get rid of the terrorists, but you can't get rid of the ideology. They're trained to hate Jews from the time they're kindergartners. And that's a culture of anti-Semitism, a culture of Jew hatred, a culture that I want Israel destroyed. And people on the left don't realize that. And I love it when you have gays and trans people coming out.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy. That's
the first one to be thrown off buildings if somehow the Hamas took over.
Real quick, because I once again, I'm not trying to cause havoc. I'm just trying to challenge this ideology of all sides. Because, like I said, I find myself questioning. I do definitely think that Hamas is the bad guys in this situation, but I'm not sure that Israel is the good guys. Here's why I say this. Because a war expert came out recently, and I read this, and he spoke about how Hamas is underground. They're in tunnels. Right. They're underground. They are hiding behind civilians, but they're underground most of the time. And most of Israel is rubble now. So it's going to be hard for Israel to fight above ground and do this invasion.
Most of Gaza is rubble now.
Yeah. And it's just very, very hard to see, knowing that Hamas would be underground. Why would you still go on top and try to do a ground invasion of a place that really you're not going to be able to find any of the Hamas war fighters?
Yeah, well,
so let me just get this one off right quick. Ethnic cleansing. It's something that even Charlie Kirk, which surprised me, who loves Israel, and why would he say so? Is there a sign that you don't think that this isn't a perfect opportunity for Netanyahu to just make it or for what it is that he wants to do? Because I can't tell you that Netanyahu is a great person. I mean, there's been times where Trump has even come at him for taking credit for Iran when he did nothing for the death of Soleimani when they were supposed to work together. So we know that Trump has some type of beef with him in the long run, but should we blindly be supporting Israel like this?
Well, if you have a better way of dealing with the fact that on October 7th, Hamas attacked killed 1,200 Israelis, men, women, and children, raped some, beheaded some, and took hundreds hostage, and still has about 150 hostage, including 5 Americans. And Hamas charter called for the death of Israel, the death of Jews. If you have and they've embedded themselves among civilians, if you have a better way of defeating your enemy than what Israel is doing, I'd love to hear it.
I don't. But I'm just saying, is there? I mean, look, we've done this before, right, Larry? Like I'm 27. I would consider myself anti-war, but remember when in 2003, 2004, when it was time to invade Iraq, right? It was time to go in for weapons of mass destruction. Right. Trump comes out. He says, well, you guys are still fighting Hamas or trying to invade Rafah for these hostages that maybe these hostages don't even exist anymore. We don't really know. Right. Like we don't even know if was Hamas able to hold Jews for that long. I don't think so. They hate Jews so much. So that's where my confusion then begins. It's like, are we repeating that same warmonger ideology? Because so many of the people that are against the Ukrainian war, they're all about this war. So it's just a bit.
I think, Lou, that Israel has probably the worst PR of any country in the world. Since its existence in 1948, there have been many instances in which Israel has given up land for peace. They won a war. They captured the entire Sinai Peninsula and discovered oil on it when Egypt hadn't discovered oil on it, gave it back in exchange for Egypt recognizing the existence of Israel. They've done this many times. There was a proposal on the table that the Clinton administration negotiated in the waning days of this administration for a Palestinian state, shared supervision of Jerusalem as capital of both states, and all that Yasser Arafat had to do was renounce the violence. He refused to do so. So the idea that somehow Israel, this warmongering, genocidal nation, is just BS, and it's incredibly unfair. The former Prime Minister Golda Meir put it this way, and I'm paraphrasing her. If the Palestinians laid down their arms, there would be peace. If the Israelis laid down their arms, there would be slaughter. That's the deal. That's why you can't have a two-state solution, because One party truly wants peace. The other party wants you dead. You can explain to me how you can have a treaty agreement between two states when one state wants you dead and one state wants to survive. I'm all ears.
And that is happening though. A lot of these kids or a lot of these young adults are coming out and they're being asked, so what would be the solution for you? And their solution is to completely dismantle Israel. Like their solution does not have Israel in it. So you are right. I'm not even arguing for them. I'm arguing more
when you hear from the river to the sea, they mean from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, with no Jerusalem, with no Israel in the middle. Yeah. I had my 21st birthday in Jerusalem. I was 21 in 1973, and I spent my birthday there. And I'm telling you, I talked to a lot of people, scholars and others, and they would love not to spend 25% of their GDP on national security. They'd love to spend that money on their economy. They're doing it because they know that if they don't do that, they're surrounded by a bunch of adversaries who want them dead.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, I'm not here defending terrorists. I think people get that misconstrued. I'm just a guy from the Bronx asking these questions from what I'm seeing. And obviously you're way more educated on this. And this is why I'm asking you this question real quick. Another, and maybe this could be toward the end. AIPAC in the United States of America. Do you think they should be registered as a foreign lobby? Because
it's a largest assembly of Jewish organizations in America, and they lobby on behalf of what they consider Jewish and Israel interests. Just as the NAACP is a major lobbying organization, there are lots of lobbying organizations. The only reason that Israel is getting this, AIPAC is getting this kind of special attention, is because they're Jewish, and in my opinion, it's anti-Semitism. There's a lot of anti-Semitism, by the way, in the Black community.
Really?
Anti-Defamation League has done surveys for decades about anti-Semitism in America. And until recently, it was at an all-time low. However, among Black people, the anti-Semitism rate is 3 times higher than the non-Black Gentile rate. Now, the majority of Blacks are not anti-Semitic. I'm just saying the percentage of Blacks who are anti-Semitic is much higher than the percentage of non-Black Gentiles who are. And I believe it's because of ignorance. A lot of Black people have no idea how close Jews have been to Black people, how Jews have helped people like Martin Luther King during the Civil Rights Commission. There's a Jew named Julius Rosenwald who worked with Booker T. Washington to build over 5,000 schools for Black kids in the South. At one time, 1 out of every 4 Black kid who went to school was educated in a Rosenwald school. In the mid-80s and early 90s, Israel airlifted Black Ethiopian Jews out of Ethiopia, escaping persecution and famine. They now live in Israel. There's surveys recently where a bunch of Americans, different groups, were asked very negative stereotypes about Black people. Are Black people dumb? Are Black people lazy? Are Black people inclined to complain too much? Are Black people prone to be criminals? The group that said yes less often than any of these groups were Jews. Blacks said yes more often than Jews did. Jews were the least anti-Black group of all groups in America. And a lot of Black people have no blooming idea about all of this. I grew up in the 60s. There were so-called freedom fighters. 400 white kids were trained to go in the South and challenge segregation laws. 200 of them were, 400 of them were trained, 200 white, 200 Blacks. Of the whites, about 50 to 75% of them were Jews. That famous Mississippi burning case, they made a movie out of it, where 3 civil rights workers were murdered. 2 of the 3 were Jewish. Jews have been friends of Black people for a very long time. A guy named Jack Greenberg worked very closely with Thurgood Marshall to win the Brown versus Board of Education case. A lot of Black people have no idea how close Jews have been to them, yet for some reason, the anti-Semitism rate among the Black community is much higher than the anti-Semitism rate among the non-Black Gentile community. It's really quite unfair.
I didn't know that. That's a new statistic for me to learn about. I'm rounding all of this up to bring it to the Bible and to bring it to you being a Christian. Obviously there's this new hate speech laws that just passed through Congress, which is worrying now, right? Like Christians are coming out. Many Christians who support Israel are saying, well, hold on now. The examples that you guys are putting out for this anti-Semitism hate speech law, a bill passed through Congress, then it has to go through the Senate, obviously. Wouldn't that be infringing upon the First Amendment to give Israel or Jews that much right over American to our Christian?
Just finish the thought just a moment ago. I wrote a piece called "The Strange Phenomenon of Black Anti-Semitism." You can go online and you can read it. You can read all these examples I've given you about what Jews have done for Black people. As for your question, I had this quarrel with Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo used to be a CNN host.
Yes.
And now it's on another
News Nation.
News Nation.
Yeah.
He's a lawyer and I'm a lawyer. And he said that the First Amendment does not protect hate speech. He's wrong. He's dead wrong. And I tweeted to him and told him, you're wrong. And he told me, no, he wasn't. Went back and forth and back and forth. Finally, he conceded that he was wrong. Hate speech is protected. I don't have to like you. I can hate you. I have a First Amendment right to hate you. I have a First Amendment right to tell you how much I hate you. What I don't have a right to do is engage in violence. But there's nothing illegal about me hating you because of your race, because of your religion, because of your sexual orientation. I can do that. The First Amendment protects hate speech. It most certainly does. As unpleasant as that seems, it does.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's you should be able to say something about the Jews and not get in trouble. You do know that on YouTube there are guidelines of protected characteristics. If I say something bad about the Jews on here, I will get banned. I've gotten strikes before. So it's not a true hatred. It's more like why would a group have that much power? I could get on here and talk about Black people all day. I could get on here and talk about white people all day. But if I talk about a Jew, Larry, is just I don't even think about the Jews. I'm from the Bronx. I don't think about the Jews. But what I'm saying is, why is it that I mentioned something about the Jewish community at some point in my video? I did a reaction to somebody saying something bad about them, and I didn't even say it, but I got a strike. Right? That's
we need to make a distinction, Lou, between government and between a private company. And YouTube is a private company, and they can have their own policies, and they could even enforce them inconsistently. But they have a right to do that. But government is a different ballgame. And
but wouldn't that bill, not to interrupt, but wouldn't that bill legitimately give that power to more private companies that now anything could be considered anti-Semitism, especially in those prime examples?
I think you're right. I think the bill is problematic, and we need to be very careful about passing things like that. As I said earlier,
that's all I'm saying. I get that we must defend Israel, especially as our ally, especially in the Middle East. But then the conversation gets to more of what these laws are, and these anti-Semitism laws have been getting passed since 2019. You know, this is not nothing new, right? The Republicans are really the ones responsible for being so loyal to Israel. Why would the loyalty to Israel be that much more than the loyalty to America? I think that
also we need to make a distinction between passing a law and passing a resolution. The House has passed many resolutions condemning hate speech and this, that, and the other, and that's fine. But putting it into a law, making a statute out of it is a whole different ballgame. So we need to make a distinction between Congress expressing an opinion versus Congress passing a law, making that opinion a matter of law. Two different things.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And you know, that's just, but once again, I really, you know, that's just me trying to learn. I obviously have a lot of leftist friends that try to educate me on these types of things.
Yeah,
and
we all have leftist friends.
No, that leftist, like, listen, I legitimately have more leftist friends than I do have right-wing friends or friends who are Christian. And in particular, I think when it comes to these types of issues, Larry, a lot of them, they are, you know, it's pressure to challenge me because they would say, well, Trump would be worse for the Middle East. He'll be worse for Palestinians. More Palestinians would die under Trump. And in my mind, well, Trump is anti-war. If you were president, and this could be the last question, if you were president, how would you stop, or if you can, at this point, I'm not sure, they're probably giving Trump a sinking ship, in my opinion. Ukraine, Russia, how would you do your best would you have done your best to make it to that Ukraine goes to the table and negotiates?
I think it's important to go back to the original sin. The original sin is the way Joe Biden pulled out of Afghanistan. Without telling our allies, leaving about $7-8 billion worth of military equipment, stranding hundreds of Afghan collaborators and even Americans who were there, and more importantly, throwing the military under the bus by saying that nobody warned him that the Afghan government would dissolve and the Taliban would come back, when in fact 2 high-level military generals testified under oath. That's exactly what we told Joe Biden. Don't do this because this is what's going to happen. 13 service members were killed because of what Biden did. That emboldened Putin, it emboldened China, and embolden Hamas. I believe had Donald Trump been elected president, none of these kinds of things we're facing right now would have happened. It's a matter of peace through strength, which is what Republicans and Donald Trump believes, versus strength through peace, which is what for some reason Democrats believe. Obama the same way. Remember Obama came in, referred to the Iraq war as a dumb war, and pulled all the troops out. Then what happened? He said ISIS was JV, and then ISIS came in and started brutalizing a bunch of people. And then little by little, Obama put back 5,000 people, which is exactly what George W. Bush said would be necessary to maintain the peace in Iraq. So there's a reason that we're facing all of this violence right now, and it would not have happened, in my opinion, had Donald Trump been reelected.
A guy like Lindsey Graham gets on Fox News and says that we need to bomb and we need to drop maybe some nuclear weapons, just like we did in Hiroshima, on Iran. Is that the solution for this? Wouldn't that be like warmongering 101, neocon? Isn't that wouldn't he be the enemy for wanting us to just flat out, drop something?
At the risk of speaking for Lindsey Graham, what he's saying is the number one sponsor of terror, the one backing Hezbollah, the one backing the Houthis in Yemen, the one backing Hamas in Gaza is Iran. Iran is the one that financed Hamas. And eventually, at some point, Iran needs to be dealt with. How we deal with that is a whole different ballgame. But eventually, we need to deal with the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world, and that is Iran.
So you're saying that what he wants to say is we need to deal with them. But
under President Trump, Iran was on its ass. Their economy was shambles. We had sanctions against them. One of the first things Joe Biden did was to loosen that sanction, and all of a sudden the oil revenues kept pouring in. So Iran is far wealthier now than it was under Donald Trump. Iran couldn't have pulled all these stunts, couldn't have financed all these different terror groups had it not been for Joe Biden. So again, there's a reason we're facing all these problems.
But didn't we give them the money? Right? Didn't Obama give them money, give Qatar money?
Obama gave him money, unfroze money. Joe Biden unfroze money. And Trump did the opposite. Trump also.
But wouldn't we be the sponsor of terrorism?
Say again?
Wouldn't we be the sponsor of terrorism?
Yeah, we would be, because we gave them all that. We're financing essentially the very war that Hamas is waging against Israel by allowing their benefactor Iran to be wealthier, and Joe Biden did that.
Yeah, I mean that's just like I said, I can blame the Middle East for all these things, but when Trump got on stage in 2016 and told Jeb Bush and told everybody on that stage that we've legitimately destabilized the Middle East, and now here we are saying that we need to drop a whole nuclear bomb on them, especially after we've played our CIA and our three-letter agencies have played a huge role in the destabilization of the Middle East. When are we going to be the ones to hold our own government accountable instead of just pointing the fingers at all these terrorists that we've created? We've created, I would say, a lot of people that hate America, and I think we've done the same thing here.
That's fair enough. And under Jimmy Carter, he pressured the Shah of Iran to release what he called political prisoners, i.e., terrorists, and they're the ones who deposed the Shah. And ever since then, 1979, we've had the Ayatollah in charge. We did that as well.
Yeah. Larry Elder, if you get the call from Trump and he says, yo, I need you to be the vice president, I think you're the guy, would you say yes?
I've answered that question this way, Lou. If Donald Trump calls with a VP offer on the other end of the line, I won't let it go to voicemail.
See that you are. When did Larry Elder become this politician that cannot answer that? Come on, Larry.
The answer, Lou, is I'd be very surprised if the offer is forthcoming. If he makes that offer, I will absolutely accept it, but he won't do it. If I were Donald Trump, I would choose a black person, but I wouldn't choose. Let me back up. If I were Donald Trump, I'd choose a black person. I would choose Larry Elder. Short of that, I would choose Byron Donalds of Florida. That's a bad dude. Strong, smart, articulate, charismatic, poised, bright, young. He's the one I like. I like Tim Scott. I like Dr. Ben Carson. But I think Byron Donalds brings an energy and a youthfulness to the table that those two gentlemen do not bring. And I know them all, and I like them all.
Yeah, a lot of people in the comments saying that they do not want another Kamala Harris, and trust me, guys, I think
Sweet.
the guys that he's naming are not nowhere near that.
No.
What about a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy?
I like Vivek. I think he's too young, but I like him a lot. Smart guy, but I prefer Byron Donalds. I really believe that Donald Trump can pick up more black votes, because I think a lot of black people are willing to reconsider their connection to the Democratic Party, than Donald Trump would pick up by having a female running mate, because I believe a lot of women in the suburbs wouldn't vote for him no matter what. But I think there are more gettable black votes than there are gettable female votes in the suburbs. So if I were Donald Trump, again, if I were advising him, I advise him to choose a black man and somebody like Larry Elder, short of Larry Elder, Byron Donalds.
Because there are a lot of black people coming out now, and they are dead tired of what is happening, and they you know, I do think that for one of the first, and I'm not sure how many times this has happened in your lifetime, but have you ever seen black people lean more toward Republicans? I mean, it maybe after, because we know the history of black people and Republicans. MLK, obviously, we know, you know, Texas, but have you ever seen it this way, where black people are actually willing to do it?
Well, the dirty little secret is that the ground has been shifting for a long time. For example, in 2008, Republicans got only 4% of the black vote, because that was the first term of Barack Obama. 2012, when he ran for re-election, Republicans got 6%. 2016, when Donald Trump ran and said, "What have you got to lose?" 8% voted for him. 2020, when he ran for re-election, 12% did. That's a 50% increase, and 20% of black males voted for Donald Trump. Now, recent polls have shown as much as 25% or 30% of blacks are willing to consider voting for the Republican Party. Why? They know schools are lousy. They have an idea that the family has been undermined. And under Donald Trump, the economy for black people was the best it's ever been. He also pardoned Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion. There are two people, Ken Burns, a left-wing documentarian for NPR, and Sylvester Stallone, the actor, and they've been trying to lobby to pardon Jack Johnson for years. They went to George W. Bush, he didn't do it. They went to Barack Obama, he didn't do it, but Donald Trump did. Donald Trump also did criminal justice reform that allowed mostly 4,000 or 5,000 mostly black inmates to have their prisons reconsidered, long nonviolent offenses, and reduced an average of 70 months. He also did what were called enterprise zones or opportunity zones, reducing tax regulations
that was huge.
in the inner city. And he put funding for black colleges on a 10-year basis. No one had ever done that before. He supports school choice, and he secured the borders. Why is that important? It was a study by the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. One of my friends named Peter Kirstenau, black guy, is on the commission. They did a study, and everybody agreed, the liberals, the independents, and the conservatives, that the number one group most hurt by illegal immigration are black and brown people living in the inner city with high school or less education. About 1 million more black people would be working today if it weren't for the presence of illegal alien labor. And the presence of illegal alien labor puts downward pressure, almost $2,000 a year, on the salaries of black people and brown people living in the inner city. And Donald Trump made us have the most secure border ever. So that directly benefited black people. So for all those reasons, that's why I did that video about Donald Trump allegedly being a racist, that so far, last I looked, had 3.3 million views.
Yeah, no, that video is going extreme. I think that video is single-handedly responsible for the shift, and I think you are responsible for the conversation that he's sparking up to the point where it's at, where I'm on here with you, the great Larry Elder, and I got the opportunity to interview you, and I believe it was because I did a reaction to that video that you put out, and it wasn't just that video. You've done other extremely amazing videos, and one of my videos, because of you, it's up to 3.3 million. The sad part about it, I didn't get to make any money from it because I've been demonetized for about 6 months. So
Lou, the only way you're not going to be demonetized if you're not saying anything. If you say something, if you're in your face, you're making points, whether you're challenging COVID, challenging the election of 2020, you're going to be demonetized. Only people who don't say anything are the ones that are not demonetized.
You got to be very careful.
I've been demonetized.
That are making a lot of money.
I've been demonetized. You've been demonetized. Anybody that tells the truth is going to be demonetized.
And those who keep making money, I got a lot of questions for them. What are they not saying?
Yes.
What type of deal they have with YouTube?
They're pulling their punches. Yeah.
Yeah. Something's up there. Larry Elder. Hold on real quick. Let me. I just want to pull out a question from the crowd because we are live, and I thank you. So many people that have come through. If you guys haven't smashed the like button, smash the like button. Lou, ask if he thinks we should close the borders for 4 years at least. For 4 years. What do you think about that? Closing the
I
border
think
for
our borders should be closed indefinitely, and only people who come in the country to benefit us should be allowed in. People want to come to America. I get that. But the fact is that only people who can benefit us and make us a better country should be allowed in. And that means you have to at least have our values and share our values.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Here's another thing that you said, like, it should, and I just think that, and I see black people. I have an attachment to black people. My girlfriend's black. I'm obviously, if you look at me, I'm obviously, you know, European and black, you know, coming from DR, but I'm not a black American. And I think a lot of black Americans that vote, you know, for the Democrats, like, why aren't black Americans mad about this border being open? And I do see a lot of them, right? And I'm talking about the Tariq Nasheeds of the world, the Dr. Umars of the world, who are extremely, extremely radical in their ways. Why wouldn't black people be more mad about the fact that we should have borders, we should respect them, and black people should be first because they are Americans? Like, why would black people support their own, I hate to say this word, but their own replacement in a way?
I think the answer is a lot of black people are unaware of how bad the borders are. A few years ago, when we had about 2 million illegal aliens in the country that year, black people, Americans, were asked, how many illegal aliens came in the country last year? And they said, the average person said 200,000, meaning they were off by a factor of 10. I watched CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News every morning, and I switch around to find out if Fox is covering something. I want to see if the other two are covering something. And for months, the Fox reporter on the border, his name is Bill Malusian, who speaks, by the way, fluent Spanish, was on the borders, and he had drones, and we're looking at all these people coming in the country. And I cut over to CNN, MSNBC, nothing. Week after week after week, month after month, nothing. It wasn't until governors from Florida and Texas put these illegal aliens on buses and sent them to Chicago and New York and Martha's Vineyard, did all of a sudden people began caring. So my point is, I think a lot of black people just don't know. If you're only watching CNN, you're only getting your news feed off of TikTok or Facebook, and the algorithms are geared toward what they think you want to hear and what you think they think you want to see. You're not watching conservative media. You are ill-informed.
Mayor Adams comes out and he says, Greg Abbott is only sending them over here because we're black.
Yeah. Well, it's not Greg Abbott.
He really said that. He said that on Drink Champs interview. And black people are like, but black people in the comments, they're like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, Greg Abbott is a racist. He sent them over here because you're a black man. They want to see you fail. Why wouldn't, like, isn't that crazy? Sanctuary city laws actually don't exist. It's because I'm black. How does that make sense?
Well, and the mayor of where Barack Obama lives in Massachusetts, he's not black. He sent them to Martha's Vineyard, and they're not black. He sent them to major cities because these are sanctuary cities that the mayor of LA, New York, and Chicago all said to illegal aliens, we're not going to prosecute you, come on down. And so Mayor Abbott, Governor Abbott of Texas, and DeSantis of Florida said, okay, you guys have talked the talk, let's see if you walk the walk. We'll send a bunch of so-called migrants up to your places and see how you like it. And then all of a sudden there's a problem. It's not Texas's fault or Florida's fault that New York elected a black mayor, Chicago elected a black mayor, LA elected a black mayor. He would have sent them up there if they were white. He sent them up there because they had pro-sanctuary policies in place. And so he wanted to find out how hypocritical they were. And we're finding out they're very, very hypocritical.
And then they go on this world tour of, you know, they're doing this because I'm a black man, not because of the sanctuary city laws that actually exist, that you yourself, Mayor Adams, and Kathy Hochul said everybody is welcomed, not knowing that that's going to hurt your community and the community you want so dearly to vote for you. Somebody in the comments, and this is another challenging question, I believe is a challenging one. Why would, and this gets said a lot, and I don't like it, which is stupid, but it is, if you're a Christian, then you shouldn't believe in borders because everybody should be welcomed. Why do people go to the most extreme to try to, I guess, excuse not having laws or rules? Because I believe that every country should have laws and rules, especially if they're going to be a country.
Well, that's right. You're not a country unless you have borders. I mean, it's that simple. Milton Friedman, who's a friend of mine, was a friend of mine. He's an economist. He died a few years ago.
Yeah, I saw some of his videos.
Yeah, he's a Republican and a small L libertarian, and I'm a Republican and a small L libertarian. And he said you cannot have open borders and a welfare state. You can have a welfare state, or you can have open borders. You cannot have both. And what we have in America is a welfare state where much of our money is being spent on all sorts of social programs and so-called entitlement programs, and you cannot just have anybody coming in. It's insane. Every country has a border. I can't think of a country that doesn't have a border. So being a Christian and supporting borders is not inconsistent.
Yeah, I guess, that's where I guess a lot of the Democrats would argue, like, oh, how can you be a Christian and believe in all these? It gets a little crazy. Maybe the final question, because I'm looking at all these questions come in. When was the last time you spoke to 45?
About 2 months ago.
2 months ago.
I was in Mar-a-Lago. I had just decided to drop out 2 months ago. About 2 months ago, I was in Mar-a-Lago because he was doing at a party to celebrate Truth Social going public. Before that, in November or so, I spent about 40 minutes with him, with my campaign manager, another campaign staffer, and we talked about me dropping out of the race, and I was going to support him. And he said, "When are you going to make your announcement?" I said, "I'm going to make it in probably a few weeks." He said, "Why don't you make it now? I'm having a big fundraiser.
Do it now. Do it now, Larry."
Having a big fundraiser downstairs. Why don't you come down and do it? So I go downstairs. There's 1,200 people there. These are the wealthiest fundraisers in America who support Donald Trump. And he said, "Follow me upstage." We go up on stage, and Donald Trump is talking about 40, 45 minutes. I'm standing there. And Lou, my feet are hurting. My ankle's hurting. My lower back is hurting. He's just going and going and going. I said, "When is this dude going to let me say something?" Somebody says, "My good friend Larry," "Larry, come on up here." So I walked up. I spoke for about 10 minutes. And then I stood next to him. He spoke for another 20 minutes. He's 5 years older than I am. The guy has the energy of a teenager. It was unreal. So that's the last time I spoke to him. We did not mention my being part of his administration. He did not make an offer to me or anything like that. I suspect he'll make an offer of something, maybe a cabinet position or some other position, I suspect. But I do not believe he's going to make me an offer to be vice president. But if he did, as I said earlier, you're the first person I've ever said this to, Lou, because you drag it out of me. If he offered it to me, I would accept.
Yeah, let's go, guys. You heard it here. Somebody's gonna clip that. That's gonna go on Twitter. So we're gonna make sure that somebody clips that and goes on X. And yeah, I believe that. I think you'll be a great candidate. Your name always comes up. Your name legitimately always comes up. Well, let me see. But before somebody asked, did you ever play golf with him?
I didn't. I don't play golf. I've got some back issues. I used to be an avid tennis player. And I can't pivot anymore, so I don't play golf, but I love the sport. But no, I never played with him. I hear he cheats.
So, guys, you heard it first. If the offer is made, that he will not decline, and I didn't think you were going to decline at all. This is good. This has been one of the best interviews I've ever done. I'm sorry that we spent the hour and 22 minutes. It's a long time, but I do want to thank you so much for the opportunity. I don't know what my future holds, to be honest, but I do know that. I love doing this, whether I'm monetized or not. I always tell people, just look at my track record. I don't get paid, and that's fine. But I do this every day, and having you on the show, man, has been a journey. It got a little tacky over there with the Israel talk, and I know some people in the comments, but this is what's called a great conversation where I think I'm challenging him. I'm not really challenging this guy. This is the OG. I can't challenge the OG. He's challenging me. He's literally asking me if I have a solution.
Lou, the former mayor of New York, Koch, once said, "If you believe 9 out of 12 issues with me, vote for me. If you believe 12 out of 12 issues with me, see a psychiatrist." So we're not going to agree on everything.
Oh, that's good. Was that Ed Koch that said that?
Yeah, he said that.
Okay. I like that one because there are some people that legitimately agree with. Okay, so I love that one. That's good. That's good because there are people that agree with everybody on a lot of things.
Finally, Lou, you told me this conversation would last about 40 minutes. We've been talking about an hour and 22 minutes. I don't know if you got the memo, but slavery has been outlawed. Where's my money?
Your reparation is on the way. Your
We
reparation is
shall
on the way.
overcome.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, wonderful interview. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours, but I know a lot of people got a lot of things to do. A lot of people are also going to watch this, so I don't want to make the video too long for you guys to not watch it. I know some people come in, they're like, oh, hour and 24 minutes. Luke, come on, really? I'm not going to click on this video afterwards. So, ladies and gentlemen, smash the like button. Larry Elder, where can they find you, and what can they do to give you your reparations?
Well, I have a podcast. I do it once a week. It's on YouTube under Larry Elder, We've Got a Country to Save. Also on Rumble, Larry Elder, We've Got a Country to Save. And I pin it to the top of my profile on Twitter. And we've been doing it now for about 12 weeks. We've been averaging about 300 to 400,000 views. I'm going to drop another one probably on Sunday. So I do it once a week. Please check it out. And go to my Twitter account at Larry Elder, and follow me.
Yeah, everything is down in the description box below. Once again, I personally, I wouldn't be here without God, without Jesus Christ, but I really wouldn't be here without Larry Elder. Thank you so much, Larry. You are a living legend, and I appreciate everything you've done for the community and everything you've done for America as a whole. Thank you so much, guys. Smash the like button, and I'll see you guys on the next one. All this information will be down in the description box below and in the comments. I'll see you guys on the next one.